the first DLC weapon was placed into supply drops and that cosmetic-only idea was broken, it's been something that people have been either on the fence about or completely against DLC weapons in Black Ops 3, and for a good reason. It ends up giving that notion that DLC would then be pay to win. Supply drops give those who pour either an incredible amount of time or a couple of bucks into supply drops a better advantage than the common player who does not have a certain set of DLC weapons. But while it's easy to just simply go with the notion that supply drop weaponry is unfair, and to many that's a die-hard belief. Of course, I'm not trying to end up swaying your opinion here on this one because it's something that is a very valid argument. I personally don't believe that weapons should be behind paywalls, but it got me thinking as of recently just how many weapons from supply drops are actually overpowered compared to other weapons in their classifications. And I'm not talking just the overall generalization of the term OP. I'm talking outclassing every single weapon in different categories for their respective classifications as a weapon. So that said, in this video, we're gonna be taking a look at the cold hard numbers of each weapon, comparing things like damage, range, rate of fire, movement speeds, the whole 9 yards, and breaking it down to whether more weapons are OP or if they're these weapons that are below par, or even weapons that are buried so far in the middle that you wouldn't necessarily consider them if they weren't DLC guns. Now, prepare yourself for an overflow of numbers and different data here with this, and as a disclaimer, we're not taking into consideration melee weapons, which are just simply reskins of the combat knife, and we're not going to be taking a look at secondary weapons either, because there's not many people that I run into in multiplayer that will beat me with a secondary pistol like the Rifty 9 or something like that, and so therefore I don't feel like this is the necessary top tier of the argument of the pay-to-win model. So that said, let's kick it off with our assault rifles. Currently there are 7 DLC assault rifles compared to the 7 base ARs, which is a kind of an odd thing to think about now that I take a look at that in depth, that I have all the numbers laid out in front of me. It's kind of strange that there are just as many DLC as there are base weapons that were released with the base game. But nonetheless, let's take a look at some of the weapons and their comparisons. Let's start out with the damage for some of these. The standard assault rifle damage is roughly 40, so that means that it's going to equate to about 3 shots no matter what, relying with the multipliers and all that of 1.1 across the board. The MX Garand has a damage of 60, the FFAR, the Peacekeeper, the LV8, and the Galil all have damages of 30, the M16 has a damage of 40, and the KVK 99M has a damage of 35. So that roughly falls below the average of the standard assault rifle, giving you essentially another shot that you need to effectively take, although with, once again, multipliers, it roughly equates out to be the same in terms of the individual shots that need to be landed. But in terms of individual damage, it's roughly below that average of 40 per shot. Now, as for the reload speeds, the standard assault rifle reload is a 2.03 average with an outlier of a 2.7 second reload of the Man of War. And these DLC weapons are actually outclassed in most cases compared to, once again, that average standard assault rifle. The FFAR and the KVK 99M have a 2.5 second reload time, while additionally other higher reload times include the LV8 Basilisk with a 2.56 second reload and the Galil of a 2.8 second reload, while the Peacekeeper falls right on the average of 2.03, and the M16 is slightly below the average in terms of just a 2-second reload. So once again, most of these are outclassed. As for the movement speed, that comes in with a 0.95 or 95% of the max speed that you can have, which is either barehanded or with a melee weapon, and all of the DLC weapons fall on the exact same average of 0.95, except for the Peacekeeper. That is just a quarter second slower than that of the other assault rifles in the classification. Now, as for the range, the standard assault rifle range is 1,000 units, which the XR2 is 1,500, the KN44 is 700, and the Man of War is 750. But the DLC weapons are actually slightly on par with this one, or just above average. The MX Garand has a range of 750 units, while the FFAR, the Peacekeeper, and the LV8 Basilisk all have a range of 1,000 units, whereas the M16 and the Galil have a range of 2,000 units, and then the KVK 99M brings that once again back down to 850 units. But as you can see, once again, a couple of these are above the average there, but as for the average overall of the DLC weapons, it's slightly on par. Now, the final thing to round out the classification of the assault rifles is the rate of fire. Now, the standard average of assault rifles is right around 536 RPM, but the MX Garand has a rate of fire of 324 RPM, the FFAR has 800, the Peacekeeper 652, the LV8 Basilisk 1000, the M16 452, the Galil 750, and the KVK 99M 555. Now, while these are all across the board and completely all over the place, these are on average just on par or slightly above average compared to, once again, that standard assault rifle. So, an assessment at the end of the assault rifle classification. Damage is below average, the reload is slower on DLC weapons, the movement is the exact same, and the range and rate of fire are slightly above average. So, to me, this kind of compensates for some factors and then brings it to a, once again, right in the middle kind of classification. But onto the SMG category, once again, another thing that caught me off guard was that there are 6 base SMGs and 5 DLC SMGs, which again is kind of odd to think about. But the damage for standard SMGs are split between 30 and 35, making some classify at a higher edge and while others are a bit lower. The HG40 and the DIY-11 Renovator are 35 damage along with the AK-74U, and the HLX and the PPSH both are at 30. So do with that what you will, they're kind of on par here with the other SMGs. The reload speed ranges from 1.8 seconds to 2.3, meaning that only the HG40 is in the upper echelon of these reload times when you look at them, that being that the HG40 is a 1.8 second reload, but then everything else is a 2.1, a 2.3, a 2 second, and a 2.5. So once again, the only one that's at the higher portion of that is the HG40. Everything else is rather outclassed or standard. The movement speed is 1.0 across the board except for the HLX, which is a 0.95 or 95% movement speed, in which it's slightly slower than the other SMGs. Now the standard ranges for these weapons are 250 to 800, so the DLC weapons, whenever you look at these stats, actually range in the upper middle class, but then again, don't necessarily take the cake for the top numbers. The HG40 is 550 units, the HLX is 700 units, the PPSH is 400 units, and the AK-74U is 500 units as well. And the rate of fire to close out the SMG category, the average is 806, bearing in mind that there's an outlier of the 1200 RPM Vesper, but all the DLC weapons fall below the average except for 2. The HG40 comes in at a 517 RPM, the DIY-11 is 517, the HLX is 1000, the PPSH is 895, and the AK-74U is 652. So once again, do with that what you will, but the assessment that I gather once again is kind of starting to see a trend here at the end of the SMG category. Some weapons have attributes that are higher than the other, but no weapons end up standing out above either the middle class or even being below par in terms of the overall performance of these weapons. Now, we have 2 more classifications left in which I want to talk about, that being the LMGs, in which there's only 1, and then 2 sniper rifles as well. So the LMG that is a DLC weapon is the R70 Ajax, in which the damage is 30, which falls below the average of 40. The movement speed is a 0.95, which is on par with the average. The range is 7,500 units, which the average of the LMGs is 5,000, so this is the only outlier there that actually stands above the rest. The rate of fire is 652, which once again falls along the average of the mid-600s, which is on par with the rest. Now the snipers, we have the RSA Interdiction and the DBSR 50. The RSA has a damage of 75, which the average for the snipers is the high 90s. Way outclassed in the damage properties. The reload is a 3.4 second reload time, which the average is around 3 seconds, making this one outclassed as well. The movement is on par with a 0.95 movement speed, which again is the average of every single sniper rifle. The range is 1,000 units, which is well below the average of the standard sniper rifle being 4,000 units, and the rate of fire is 50, which is standard for single shots, outliers removed of the Dracon and the PO6. Now, the DBSR is once again coming in with a damage of 75, well below the average 90s, a reload speed of 3 seconds, which is right on par with the average of 3 seconds, a standard movement speed of 0.95, and a range again of 1,000 units, well below that 4,000 average, and a rate of fire of 85, which is actually high for single shot weapons, which again, the outliers removed. So with those last 2 classifications that I wanted to talk about out of the way, once again, there are some things that stand out, but nothing in particular that makes one weapon, at least in my mind, a way better choice than that of a standard base weapon. And the interesting part is this conclusion for each different classification really does seem like a trend, and it kind of holds true across the board. Some weapons do have some properties that are a little bit better, but also have counterbalancing effects in which attributes are way worse than some of the standards. So when you take a look at them entirely, it's something that honestly, if it wasn't a DLC weapon, a lot of these I would not play around with, if any at all. So despite the age-old complaints about being paid to win or anything like that, the numbers here to me are a telling sign, something that's honestly, if I would not have considered these, I'd probably still once again be on board with that. Well, I don't think it's necessarily all that fair. When you take a look at the attributes and the damage properties and everything else that go into a weapon that make it something that is either amazing or not necessarily amazing, it's interesting to take a look at that these all really just fall in that middle class and kind of in the weapon design category were intentionally done so that they are not necessarily something that stands out. But again, I'm not trying to end up swaying anybody's opinion. I know some people will definitely still 100% take their prior convictions and still once again believe in it 100% and wholeheartedly, which there is absolutely nothing wrong, because as mentioned at the beginning of the video, I think supply drop weapons are stupid. I think that putting something that is out of reach, which could easily be in a base game or just free DLC, I think that that is an awful idea, and I think it's a way that you end up in time losing a player base that is no longer interested because they can't get the new stuff while somebody that spends 50 bucks can. I definitely agree that the paywall is something that should totally be removed, but in terms of the raw, simple gameplay mechanics of it, does it come down to something that supply drop weapons are paid to win or overpowered? From what I've seen number-wise and how the game should work at its core, they're not necessarily anything that amaze me and say, you know what, I should totally drop all my money so that I can be way better at the game because this gun is the gun you need to have. Personally, I don't feel like that, but of course, that's where we're gonna wrap it up. Let me know your thoughts down there in the comment section down below. Do you agree or disagree that once again, these weapons are primarily just in the middle of the pack, somewhere that, again, if it wasn't a DLC weapon, you necessarily would not choose them? Feel free to let me know your thoughts down there in the comment section down below. I know this is a polarizing topic, so let's try and keep it a little bit civil if we can. And if you see somebody that doesn't necessarily agree with you, take that as their opinion. We're all entitled to our own. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you guys did, make sure you drop a like down below. And of course, if you guys are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe to stay up to date with everything we have here regarding Black Ops 3, both multiplayer and Zombies and Zombies Chronicles, Call of Duty World War II, both multiplayer and zombies there as well, Modern Warfare Mastered, Infinite Warfare, all that good stuff we got you covered here up on the channel. And finally, if you guys want to follow me over on Twitter, that is the best place to get connected with me outside of YouTube. I practically live on Twitter, so if you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever it may be, link is down there in the description below. But all that said and out of the way, hope you guys had a fantastic day. Thanks so much for watching. Mine is an espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.